Welcome in on this Friday. I'm Elizabeth Cook. The trade fight might have you a bit worried, but there's a good sign for the economy today with the April jobs report. Plus, we already know that Mike Waltz is out as National Security Advisor, but we're getting a look into the next steps for his nomination to be UN ambassador. And tracking some severe storms in North Texas to end the work week, this is CBS News 24/7. Taking a live look at the big board now, the Dow up several hundred points after the better than expected April jobs report. We didn't see any slowdown because of President Donald Trump's tariffs just yet. And here's a look at those new numbers. Employers across the U.S. added 177,000 jobs last month. The country's unemployment rate also held steady at 4.2%. CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady is standing by at the Newark Stock Exchange to explain what these numbers mean for you at home. But first, let's get to CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman live from West Palm Beach, Florida. Willie, we're going to get the White House's take on the jobs report shortly, but tell us first about their budget proposal that was just released.
Hey there, Liz. Good to be with you. Now, this budget proposal is part of the overall budget that the administration wants to put forward in terms of overall federal spending next year. It focuses on domestic programs, so non-defense programs, and makes cuts about 22%, some $163 billion in cuts. There are some agencies that essentially were spared from these cuts that the Trump administration is proposing in the first budget proposal of the president's second term. That would include transportation, homeland security, veterans affairs, among other priorities. But there are many cuts to be talked about. But just to sum it up, essentially the administration is going after anything DEI related or diversity, equity, and inclusion, or something that, or CRT for that matter. That is certainly something that has been a focus of this administration, wanting to get rid of those programs that they believe discriminate against Americans. Also, on top of that, you have climate programs and certain foreign aid programs that will be cut in this budget proposal. Now, remember, this is just a wish list, a priority or a message, so to speak, from the administration in terms of what they want in terms of that federal spending. But it's up to Congress to determine those spending levels. So administration officials will certainly have to shuttle over across Pennsylvania Avenue to have those conversations with lawmakers to get those priorities across the finish line, Liz.
And Willie, the president has also ordered big cuts in federal funding for both PBS and NPR public broadcasting. What could that mean for these longtime broadcasters?
Yeah, well, that certainly could affect down the road if this does indeed go into place. Those local stations, more specifically, remember PBS and NPR are on the national stage. They broadcast across the nation, but you have those smaller radio stations, those smaller TV stations that benefit from public funds through the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And I want to point out a statement from that particular group. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting is already suing to stop the president from firing 3 of its board members. But they say CPB is not a federal executive agency subject to the president's authority. Congress directly authorized and funded CPB to be a private nonprofit corporation wholly independent of the federal government. So you have that statement there coming from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. The reason why I point out that statement is because the funding would essentially go through CPB and then go out to PBS, NPR, other stations across the country. And the president is targeting NPR and PBS through the CPB. So it's clear that there could down the road be some potential legal fight. But in the short term, if this indeed does happen, if that funding does stop, the local stations and perhaps some of those local TV stations as well will lose the most, Liz.
And those so-called news deserts that are expanding across the country are really going to feel the impact from that. And Willie, turning now to the shakeup of the president's national security team, what impact will the departure of National Security Advisor Mike Waltz have on Trump and his Secretary of State Marco Rubio?
Yeah, well, it's a lot more work for Marco Rubio now, right? He has yet another title that has been added to the list of jobs that he has to take on. Not only is he Secretary of State, but now he'll have this responsibility under his belt as well. The president praised the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, yesterday in his remarks. He essentially talked about when he has a problem, he calls Marco. So certainly that is a task that he will have to take on, but Mike Waltz departing this position is really something that has been discussed behind closed doors in the White House. There was not necessarily a call from the president to say that Waltz should step down, but this follows that Signalgate controversy where the outgoing National Security Advisor inadvertently added a journalist to that Signal group chat where sensitive military information was discussed. So certainly there's a shakeup there. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, stepping in, at least temporarily, until a permanent National Security Advisor could be named, but there's no shortage of worldwide problems that the national security team over at the White House has to face. And certainly all of those problems will now be on the Secretary of State, at least temporarily, Liz.
I want to get back to that strong jobs report, Willie. The White House must be pretty pleased with those numbers despite uncertainty over President Trump's tariffs. What are they saying today?
Yeah, that's right. Oftentimes in these types of statements that we see from any political leader, they talk about the good. They don't talk about the bad necessarily. And so let's bring up that statement from the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. And part of that statement says, she says, this is the second month in a row where the jobs report has beat expectations. She then goes on to say, this is exactly what we want to see. More Americans working for higher wages. More winning is on the way. The end of that statement reads from the press secretary. Look, this jobs report comes a couple of weeks after President Trump announced his tariffs on not just China, but other nations around the world, the reciprocal tariffs. You have the auto tariffs as well. Some of those prices have started to factor in. Some people have seen, at least especially when it comes to buying the goods from China, have seen those prices rise. But this is good economic news for the country, of course. Some 177,000 jobs created, but the White House oftentimes doesn't necessarily want to talk about the impact that these tariffs will have, although down the road we do know that there will be an impact. The president himself has admitted that you will have some pain in the interim until manufacturing can be moved to the United States. But that is a tall order to bring manufacturing back to this country. You have to get factories online. You have to hire folks. So it's a long-term plan, the White House says at least. But in the interim, you have this jobs report, 177,000 jobs created last month that the White House is celebrating amid this concern about how tariffs could affect the economy here in the United States and also around the world.
All right, Willie James Inman, thank you so much. Good to see you. Happy weekend. All right, let's get back to Kelly OGrady at the New York Stock Exchange. Kelly, what are the main takeaways where you're at from this jobs report?
Oh, well, I've got all of the indexes. I can see them out of the corner. They're all up right now. Investors here, are happy about this. The three main takeaways for me is one, this is a solid labor market. All right, we have had a couple of reports here that have beat expectations month after month. We were expecting a number of 135,000. That would still have been a solid labor market. We didn't see any change in the unemployment rate. Anything in that 4 to 4.4% band is considered full employment. So this is good. The underlying fundamentals of the economy are good in the labor market. And we also got data earlier this week that shows inflation is cooling. So that's one. Two, we have not seen businesses pull back on hiring at a level that impacts that headline jobs number in the economy. There's, of course, a lot of concern, and we have heard anecdotally that some businesses are pressing pause and they aren't hiring as much. Some are laying off some, but that is not the prevailing theme that we are seeing across the economy. So not to say that it won't come, but right now, this is a labor market, a business market that is not pausing on the hiring front. Final thing though, a couple of things as you dig into the numbers that could mean slowing ahead. A lot of the growth came from transportation and warehousing. That added 29,000 jobs. Think about the fact that we just had a lot of imports coming into the country. That means a lot of warehouses that needed to staff up to get those on the shelves before those price increases take effect with the tariffs. Also think about a lot of transportation, a lot of drivers to get those from place to place. The other one is leisure and hospitality. We saw 24,000 jobs added. That is a sector that this summer we have heard from companies we could see a pullback as consumer spending may start to slow down. So overall, though, good report, solid report. People are happy here, Liz.
Yeah, the good news is people are working. They just may not be willing to open their wallets quite as often. Well, after this jobs report, Kelly, we're also hearing from Barclays and Goldman Sachs on when they expect the Federal Reserve to make their next interest rate cut. So what are they saying?
So we're hearing July. So that means no at the Fed meeting next week on May 7th. And no in June. We're expecting now, based on what the market is pricing in, 2 more Fed meetings before we would get an interest rate cut. And if you look at the data, that makes sense. We just had the strong jobs market report. We just had the strong inflation report, seeing that number come down closer to the Fed's 2% target. So the data doesn't warrant that. Doesn't mean it can't change, Liz, because I will tell you, before that jobs report came out this morning, I checked what the market was pricing in, the chance that we could see a rate cut in June. It was above 50%. A45 rolls around, it's below 50%. And then July becomes the number, and you're seeing that reflected in the predictions right now. So all to say, that's where we are right now. Things can change minute by minute here.
Yeah, it's really hard to predict. We get that, Kelly. I want to follow up on one story we're also following. We're hearing that Zelle users are reporting outages across the country. What do we know about that?
Okay, so Zelle, this is the digital payment service that you can send money from one person to another directly in the bank accounts. If you're a Bank of America user, that's, for example, something that you can often use. We are hearing that there are outages, and I want to share a statement from Zelle. They provided to CBS News with you to give you context on what's going on. They said, we're aware that certain users at some financial institutions are not able to use Zelle at this time. The situation involves an independent third party that provides services to particular financial institutions. We're working diligently with our partners to resolve the matter as soon as we can. Zelle users may see transactions marked as payment pending in the meantime. So Liz, all to say, if folks are out there and they're seeing that payment pending, you're not alone. This is something that the company is aware of, and it does seem to be a third party that they work with that there may be the issue at. They're going to provide updates as they come.
All right, sounds good. Kelly OGrady, thank you so much. All right, North Texas bracing for even more severe storms. Large hail, damaging winds, even a tornado are all possible in this latest round. Jessica Birch will break down the timing of all this when we come back. You're watching CBS News 24/7. The Tennessee Highway Patrol released body camera footage of their November 2022 encounter with Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Now, the Trump administration deported him to a prison in El Salvador earlier this year. Now, during this 2022 incident, though, state troopers pulled Garcia over for speeding. Let's take a listen to some of that interaction.
You got a bunch of people in here, don't you?
It's one for seat. Yes. Go back to work.
Gotcha. Where are you working at?
Where?
Where?
San Luis, Missouri.
Missouri?
Yes, sir.
Gotcha. Okay.
But I'm from Maryland.
Okay. Now,
And moving forward, Abrego Garcia admitted to driving 8 people with no luggage from Texas to Maryland to do construction work. Now, at that time, state troopers suspected him of human trafficking. He was not arrested or charged for any crime, though. So let's bring in CBS News Department of Justice correspondent Scott McFarland for more on all this. Scott, does this video give the Trump administration more power in not complying to the order by the courts to get Abrego Garcia back to the U.S.?
It doesn't change the legal issue here for the administration, but it sure does give them something to inflame the political issue. And in fact, it didn't take long for the White House press secretary to point to that video and argue again that the deportation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia was righteous, that he was a danger. The political issue is going back and forth, and it likely will for some time. The legal issues, though, are quite different. The judge in Maryland ordered the return of Abrego Garcia because it was admittedly a mistaken deportation. He was not to be sent to El Salvador based on a previous court order because he'd fled El Salvador years earlier. And the judge in the case, Paula Zinnes in Greenbelt, Maryland, has ordered the Department of Justice and the Trump administration to provide a series of answers about how this mistake happened, if and when Abrego Garcia is to return to the United States as ordered, and his current condition. And those pieces of information must be submitted to the judge by date set next week.
Sticking with immigration, Scott, a federal judge ruled the Trump administration's use of the Alien Enemies Act, we've been talking about that a lot lately, to deport Venezuelans out of Texas is unlawful. Can you break down that decision?
What's important is not just the 36-page decision itself, but where the decision came from. The judge in this case was a Trump-appointed judge from 2017, and he sits in Brownsville, Texas, the Southern District of Texas. Among the things he says in his order is that it's unlawful to use the Alien Enemies Act the way the Trump administration is doing so, that it's not clear there has been an invasion by a foreign power into the United States at this moment, which is the roots of the Alien Enemies Act in the 18th century. The judge also issuing this ruling from Texas protects other people from the Southern District of Texas from Alien Enemies Act deportations. And the judge says two other things: that deportations can still happen through traditional means, but also that he finds the argument from the plaintiffs that the administration overreached to be compelling. But here's the thing. The Trump administration has been rerouting would-be deportees to Texas and to Louisiana, potentially with the idea that that might expedite these removals because there may be more sympathetic judges there. This ruling proves that theory wrong.
And Scott, we're also keeping an eye on that approaching deadline for the Senate to decide whether they will confirm Trump's controversial pick, Ed Martin. There he is there as the top federal prosecutor in Washington. But now new concerns coming from his own party. Now, for our viewers, some context to all of this. Ed Martin is a Republican activist. He began serving as the interim U.S. attorney for D.C. just hours after President Trump's inauguration. He was then nominated for the Senate-confirmed post. Martin also served as an advocate in the Stop the Steal movement, which is denying the 2020 election results. So, Scott, what's the biggest concern that Senate Republicans have with Martin?
They have a few different concerns, one of which is that he's never been a prosecutor before, never led this type of office, and the U.S. attorney in Washington, D.C., though it may seem like an obscure post, is arguably one of the most powerful U.S. attorneys in America with the largest portfolio and one of the largest staffs. But there also are concerns that he has tethers to January 6th. He was there in the crowd outside the Capitol that day, not charged with a crime, not criminally held liable for being there. What's more, he's represented January 6 defendants and has, over the past few months, tried to whitewash the history of January 6. Putting him in charge of the office that very much literally prosecuted January 6 cases causes concern. And here's the bottom line. They need Republican votes to line up to confirm Ed Martin. And if they're not staging the vote now, it could be because they don't have the Republican votes they need. There's concern on both sides of the aisle, and this could be a real rarity here. A Trump nominee Republicans don't get behind.
Yeah, that is rare. All right, Scott McFarland, thank you so much. Have a great weekend. All right, we're taking you to Fort Worth, Texas, where we are tracking strong storms in that area. Rain already coming down, but it's going to get intense, Jess.
It is going to get intense, and we've seen so much already in areas like Texas and Oklahoma. There's been small communities that have already seen up to around 7 inches of rain just within the past 48 hours. We're continuing to add to that as we head into the afternoon hours today. Those storms are eventually going to track off to the East Coast this weekend, giving some people some relief in sight. However, it's still been such a mess. I mean, this week we had 2 major storms sweep throughout the South, all the way over into the Midwest, and now over into the Mid-Atlantic right around the corner. Let's time this out. This is what it's going to look like as we head into the next 48 hours. Strong storms sweeping across the Mississippi, pushing throughout areas like Alabama and Georgia. Atlanta's going to get hit heavy with some rain right around the corner. And at the same time, this is a loop, by the way, so it's playing again. Once we head all the way over into the Northeast, we're also gearing up for some soggy conditions heading into this week. weekend's forecast, so to fish out that umbrella, it's not a bad idea. We make our way down to the south, though. Some of the heaviest amounts of showers that we're going to see, it's areas close to Houston and Austin, stretching all the way up into places like Kentucky, too. Tennessee, Nashville alone. I mean, we could see heavy amounts of rain into the next 48 hours. And here's what's happening. These thunderstorms pack a punch for a couple reasons. We could see lightning. We could potentially see hail with all these thunderstorms, too. Damaging winds at times as these sweep throughout our communities. And we've already seen so much of this already this week. So we're continuing that trend with heavy showers pushing off now into the northeast, heading into our Saturday and Sunday forecast. Now, up into the northeast, a couple things to talk about. If you live near Boston, New York, Pennsylvania, anywhere throughout those communities, we've been dealing with temperatures above average. Now they're going to start cooling down as these cold fronts sweep throughout the northeast. However, back in places like Texas, Louisiana, and all the way up into Lexington, Kentucky, we're under that enhanced risk today when it comes to our severe weather outlook. So it's important to note that we're not out of the clear just yet. Heading into this weekend, we still have a lot of inconvenient weather right around the corner, but it is eventually pushing offshore into Sunday's forecast and will clear up on the back end.
The end is in sight.
In 2 days.
Okay, we just have to get through the next 2 days.
Of course.
Jess, thank you. We now have a clearer picture of President Trump's vision for the so-called Big Beautiful Bill. The White House just released its fiscal 2026 budget proposal. Now, President Trump is proposing more than $160 billion in cuts to non-defense discretionary spending. But it's now in the hands of Congress to actually write this blueprint into law. Let's get straight to CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian. Nicole, how are lawmakers responding to this?
Yeah, well, just to be clear, obviously we're talking about a number of different budget measures that are working through this Congress. We, of course, have that reconciliation package that you mentioned that really ticks through a lot of the president's priorities. But this is kind of what's known as a skinny budget, if you will, a blueprint for the president's broader priorities in fiscal year 26. And so from that standpoint, of course, it is earning a lot of praise from Republicans. It does include some reductions in some costs across a number of different agencies, whether that's the Department of Health and Human Services and other entities, some cuts to foreign aid, certainly a lot of kind of what we have seen in terms of just overall some of the steps the administration has taken thus far with respect to, targeting programs that have DEI initiatives, or again, looking at the issue of foreign aid. So these are just kind of codified in this budget blueprint, if you will. Republicans, for their part, are praising this budget, of course, but certainly Democrats are once again expressing concerns about the cuts, which they believe are too extreme.
Yeah, Nicole, we understand that some of the committees tasked with drafting the reconciliation bill may need more time. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, and so again, just to be clear, this reconciliation bill, even though it is guided by a budget resolution, is separate from the budget that the president just released earlier today. So this reconciliation package is really focused, again, on turbocharging the president's legislative agenda, particularly in the areas of border security, energy independence, and extending the president's tax cuts, most notably. So that is a process we have been talking about for several months now. And of course, you have a number of committees that are working through this legislation, but some of those critical committees that will be charged with, for instance, potentially looking at cuts to Medicaid or looking at potential adjustments to SNAP benefits, or again, looking at extending the president's tax cuts. Those committees, Energy and Commerce, House Ways and Means, Agriculture, as of now, they don't have a markup on the books. There was some expectation that could happen next week, but now we're hearing it's possible that could shift to later in the month, although committee aides tell me, look, we never had a date on the calendar to begin with. And quite frankly, that's because there are a lot of big thorny issues to work out with, particularly around the issue of Medicaid. We know that Speaker Johnson met just yesterday with the president to kind of talk through some potential proposals. You also have on the tax portion of the bill this issue of SALT, the state and local tax deductions, which is really important to Republicans here in the Northeast. That is an issue that remains unresolved. So that's in part why we're not seeing some movement just yet in these critical committees.
All right, Nicole Killian, thanks so much. Meanwhile, the Pentagon reacting to the news that National Security Advisor Mike Waltz will step down. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will take over then for NSA duties for at least the time being. So let's bring in CBS News Pentagon reporter Ellie Watson. She joins us live. So how does all of this impact what's happening where you are in the Pentagon?
Yeah, so Mike Waltz leaving the NSC. Officials tell us that his reputation never really recovered from Signalgate back in March after he inadvertently added a reporter to the chat discussing strikes against the Houthis. Democratic lawmakers on the Hill yesterday upon this news said that the wrong person was fired for Signalgate, that although Waltz added a reporter to the chat, which is not good, it was Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth who actually sent what at the very least is sensitive details about weapons and timings of strikes before the strikes happened. So far, Secretary Hegseth has at least one key ally in President Trump himself, who continues to deny any reports that he's looking for a replacement and continues to voice support for the defense secretary that he chose for the position.
I want to pivot here for a moment, Ellie. What do we know about a second military zone along the border with Mexico?
So yesterday, the U.S. military announced a second national defense area. These national defense areas are essentially a way to work around federal law that prohibits active duty troops from acting as domestic law enforcement. The first national defense area was announced back in mid-March and is about 170 miles along the New Mexico border. And the second area announced last night is about 63 miles along the Texas-Mexico border. These two strips of land, about 60 feet deep, are essentially extensions of U.S. bases. So that means that the roughly 8,000 active duty troops at the border now have the authority to treat anyone who comes through that strip, including migrants, as trespassers, detain them, and then transfer them to civilian law enforcement. Now, the military has had active duty troops at the border under both Republican and Democratic administrations, but those troops have largely acted in administrative support of Customs and Border Protection, providing some transportation for CBP agents and letting CBP know if they see anything on drones about where migrants may be crossing the border. But dealing with migrants face-to-face has been the responsibility of CBP, who has the training and the experience for that, whereas for the military, detaining migrants, this is a new authority. I would also note that according to data analyzed by CBS provided by the Department of Homeland Security, border crossings are at a historic low. So it's unclear how long the Department of Homeland Security might require the extra help of such a large military presence at the border.
And we're also learning, Ellie, that there actually could be a military parade on President Trump's birthday. What do we know about those plans?
So the Army has been preparing to commemorate its 250th anniversary of the founding by the Continental Congress of the Army in 1775 on June 14th, which also coincidentally happens to be President Trump's 79th birthday. The Army already had plans for its own birthday celebration on the National Mall with equipment and with troops, and now it's planning for the potential of a military parade that could include thousands of troops and other equipment like Bradley vehicles, Stryker vehicles, armored tanks. President Trump has expressed interest in a military parade before, back in his first term, after he saw one commemorating Bastille Day in France. The last time a military parade was held in D.C., though, was in 1991 at the end of the first Gulf War. Estimates at the time said that parade cost about $8 million, which would be closer to about $20 million if held today.
Wow. Okay. Ellie Watson, thank you so much. Well, a headache for travelers today in New Jersey. Coming up, we're going to take you live to Newark Liberty International Airport for more on these delays and how they could impact you. You're watching CBS News 24/7. The U.S. Coast Guard now federalizing the response to the oil spill off the Louisiana coastline. Officials say as much as 100,000 gallons poured into the Gulf this week. Marshlands are now polluted, exposing the living ecosystem there to dangerous toxins. Let's go straight to CBS News reporter Katie Weiss, who was near the scene for us. Katie, what kind of federal help would the Coast Guard bring in?
Oh, well, they've got quite the big response that's coming to clean up this mess that has been going on since it was first discovered on Saturday. And I'm told that this oil is actually, to give you an imagery here, spewing out of the ground like a geyser, 30 to 40 feet up in the air. I'm told so far there have been about 30,000 gallons of an oily, watery mixture that has been collected by more than 2 miles worth of boom materials and 12 different skimmers on site. I'm told also more than 170 people are working together with several different agencies to try to clean up this mess. Let's take a listen to what the man in charge of the entire response efforts has to say about it. What can you tell us about, potential reasons for this happening?
So it's hard to guess what the reason is, but we do know we are dealing with a well that was initially drilled back in 1942. So there's which has been there for a long time. So that is also part of the complications in planning for how we are going to actively secure the well. So it's understanding the integrity of the line and making sure that once we are there, we're ready to respond to anything that may come up that may cause us to change tactics.
And another challenge that they're facing as well is just the sheer remote location of this spill. It's 30 miles off the southernmost tip of the coast of Louisiana, so it's taking a long time for crews to get materials out there to better respond.
Yeah, and there's marshlands in that area, Katie. Do we have a clearer picture of how the spill is affecting the environment there?
Absolutely. Where this spill is actually located, I'm told by local community members and conservationists, is actually a breeding ground for shrimp. And it's a big part of the shrimping industry here in Louisiana. And shrimping season is expected to begin in just a couple weeks right there in that area. So this spill could have some major impacts on the livelihoods of the people there who depend on that shrimp season. Another big impact is that we know that federal agencies have recorded the spill having moved further into the Gulf and into protected areas for sea turtle habitats, as well as areas where we know that there could be impacts likely to dolphins, fish, and other birds as well. So these are all things that conservationists are going to continue to monitor. I asked if so far there have been any recorded impacts to wildlife, and so far I'm told there's none officially reported. But it's important for folks out in the public, if you happen to be out in a boat on the Gulf, make sure to report anything out of the ordinary that you might see.
Hopefully this federal help will help speed up the cleanup efforts there. Katie Weiss, thanks so much. All right, taking now to Newark, New Jersey, where the FAA says a mix of construction and staffing issues are what's prompting widespread delays at Newark Liberty International Airport. Now, those delays are causing major headaches for travelers looking to kick off their weekend. So let's take you there now. CBS News New York's Christine Sloan is live at Newark Liberty International Airport. Christine, what's the latest?
Well, Liz, we are seeing delays on both departures and arrivals here at Newark Liberty International Airport. Now, the departure board's showing delays of up to 3 hours, the average being about 2 hours. Passengers telling us they are feeling really frustrated because it's just the beginning of May and we're not even into the big summer travel season. An FAA spokesperson says the delays are due to equipment issues, runway construction, and staffing shortages in Philadelphia, which houses traffic control for Newark, guiding planes in and out of this airport. Now, we did speak to some passengers here, some of them stranded, telling us that they are making alternative plans just in case.
Yeah, we got a 1 hour delay so far. I don't know if it's going to get delayed again or not.
You got kids too, right? And
oh yeah, 2 kids. We're already scoping out hotels just in case we get delayed even more.
You're laughing though.
Well, we're going to make the most of it.
We're just traveling to Miami. I didn't even see that. I got an email about it being delayed. I just went in to see, and then I saw delayed. It's crazy.
Now, many airlines are saying they'll offer waivers or help rebook flights, but they say they're not going to be responsible for hotel stays because, Liz, this is what they say is an FAA issue.
All right, Christine Sloan, thank you so much. We are just a day away from the Kentucky Derby. Our eye on America takes us to Churchill Downs for a trainer that just won't quit. You're watching CBS News 24/7. New pictures just in show a vessel putting out a fire on an aid ship bound for Gaza. The Freedom Flotilla Coalition campaign group says the ship was attacked in international waters by drones in the middle of the night off Malta. The group didn't blame the drone attack to any country or group, but Israeli forces previously boarded and seized Freedom Flotilla boats to stop them from breaching the blockade there. CBS News reached out to the Israel Defense Forces about this, but no response just yet. Our monitors now catching Russell Brand leave a London courtroom after he was granted bail on rape and sexual assault charges. The actor and comedian did not enter a plea today. 4 women say Brand sexually assaulted them in England between 1999 and 2005. Brand has been interviewed by police about these allegations, which he denies. The Vatican Fire Brigade has put up the famous chimney on the roof of the Sistine Chapel. CBS News foreign correspondent Chris Livesay reports from Rome, just 5 days before cardinals gather for the conclave to choose the next pope.
Well, here in St. Peter's Square, that mood of mourning over the death of Pope Francis has shifted to one of excitement over who his successor is going to be. Now, you couldn't ask for a better vantage point than this one. Just over my shoulder, you can see the Sistine Chapel, where that white smoke is eventually going to come out announcing Habemus Papam. We have a pope.
It's fantastic. It's really historical, isn't it?
I love this country. I love Italy. I'm Italian myself.
The way it works is the cardinals, more than 130 of them from around the world, they write their votes on a piece of paper and then they're burned. And if there's a 2/3 consensus that's reached, well, then you've got the white smoke saying we have a pope. But if they don't reach that 2/3 consensus, it's black smoke. Now, typically, it's taken 2 or 3 days of voting in order to arrive at a pope. At least that's been the case for the last several papacies. But this conclave could take a little more time because there are so many cardinals from far-flung places around the world that Francis himself named in places like Mongolia and Papua New Guinea that we just don't know a lot about, and we don't know how they're going to vote. Some of them might even struggle to communicate with the other cardinals because their Italian might not be very good. So it may take longer than your typical conclave, and we might have a wild card, a candidate, so to speak, a pope that nobody saw coming. So there's a lot of guessing going on as to who the next pope is going to be. Chris Livesay, CBS News, Rome.
Well, the biggest names in golf will tee off in the U.S. Open in about a month from now in Texas, but a Tennessee teen could be joining them on the course. Meet Raymond Rebel. The 14-year-old has been competing and winning against people more than double his age. He won a regional qualifier, and if he wins the next qualifier this month, he will be playing in the U.S. Open against the big boys in June.
I just love the challenge and the work that it takes to be great, and I'm just addicted to it. I'm just trying to keep really present and just knowing that a lot of people are looking up to me is just really impactful, and it makes me feel really good.
He makes it look so easy, doesn't he? Well, if he wins the next qualifier, he would be tied with the youngest player ever to compete in the U.S. Open. Well, it is our Eye on America series. The Kentucky Derby is coming up tomorrow, and it's been called the most exciting 2 minutes in sports. Jim Axelrod tells you about the favorite in the race, the four-legged namesake of the Fourth Estate.
Now may be a tough time for journalism. Unless you're a horse, journalism's your name, and you're the favorite for the Kentucky Derby.
No fake news here. Journalism's the favorite.
Yeah. Journalism's trainer, Michael McCarthy's been in the horse game long enough to know animals like this don't come along very often.
Is this horse your best shot so far at winning a Derby on your own?
Oh yeah, definitely. Anybody who's in the horse business, this is kind of where they want to be, so.
Which is why, from the start of his day, long before sunup, to the workouts and baths and careful strolls around the barn, McCarthy and his team are locked down on journalism making horse racing history.
You are as focused as a man could be.
Yeah, everybody is. I'm expecting it of his groom, his rider, everybody involved with him.
Everybody's got to be on their A game.
Exactly, exactly.
With a chance to win the Kentucky Derby here on Saturday, you can understand why Michael McCarthy is laser focused on his horse and this track. No room for anything else. Not in his head, perhaps, but his heart? That's a very different story.
This is on a scale that's like unfathomable.
A story told 2,000 miles from Churchill Downs in what's left of McCarthy's neighborhood in Altadena, California. 2 weeks ago, he showed us around the devastation.
There's a whole gamut of emotions. You know, you're upset that, you know, your community's gone through this. You're angry that, you know, maybe some of this could have been avoided.
The fires got within 600 feet of his home. While he has smoke damage to deal with, many of his neighbors are confronting so much more.
I gotta believe it would be a nice little lift for some folks in your home community.
Yeah, that'd be great. It's been a few months now. People are still healing. People are still without a place to live. So maybe for a couple hours on Saturday, we can provide them a little bit of entertainment.
Quite the backstory for this Saturday's Run for the Roses.
No matter what you feel about journalism, the profession, everyone can get behind journalism, the horse.
Yeah, I think we can all come together for this.
The rules of journalism hold there's no cheering from the press box. But this journalism and his trainer remind us all rules are made to be broken. For Eye on America, I'm Jim Axelrod at Churchill Downs.
What a great story to end the week. Thanks, Jim. All right, taking a live look at the big board. The Dow up several hundred points after that better than expected April jobs report. So what does it all mean for you at home? We'll have that much more when Lindsay Reiser takes over next right here on CBS News 24/7.